Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Final Fantasy IV. No time to explain anything yet, as we need to focus up here before going any further.
Wait, was I supposed to be reading all of that? I just figured you would explain things, but I didn't hear anything for a while, so I figured it wasn't important.
Well, it was kind of important, but mainly there's going to be something called the Lunar Whale coming out of the water, which is going to allow us access to the moon and set us up with the next character to help us since Cain left yet again last time.
Now, I've heard of some crazy stories, most of them coming from Joe, but I don't think the game designers thought of something that insane here.
I'm with George, that's just too weird.
Okay, fine, I suppose it came out of the water just like you said, and I'm not sure how that's supposed to work at all, but I still doubt it can bring us to the moon. I mean, who even would have made this? Why would they need to go there? I don't think this has been mentioned before, as other characters haven't expressed interest in going there, so why start now?
If I've learned anything from this game, is that things don't have to make sense for them to just happen. We may as well accept it now.
Despite your doubts, yes, we are on the moon. There's a lot to explain about this. Gameplay-wise, we'll find some new enemies here, or variations of existing ones too. There's a place with the naming ways which are seen every once in a while in the game, but mainly the 3D version. There's also a cave that allows access to fight another summon, but we won't be seeing it today. There's this weird stone face on the surface, and while it does nothing in the original release, in the Game Boy Advance and PlayStation Portable versions, they allow you to access the lunar ruins for your characters and go through new scenarios. In the 3D version, after getting a specific item, you'll fight a new boss fight called Proto-Babel. They're not here, so there's not much point discussing those. In regards to the other questions, it actually wasn't built by anybody on Earth to go to the moon, but rather the other way around. There were some characters that look very similar to people on the moon, but we won't see most of them now. They were called Lunarians, and before anyone asks, no, I don't know how they're breathing in open space like this.
At this point, we've already seen so many crazy things happen that this is definitely the strangest one, but not exactly something that should surprise us all that much by now. I don't anticipate we'll go to any other planets. Can you describe what a Lunarian is exactly and how that's relevant to our quest?
That's going into spoilers a little bit, so I can't fully answer it. They vary a little bit. One of them looks like a pretty old person, and there's a few others that aren't entirely Lunarian that look pretty much identical to a normal person, though one of them appears to be much darker in the after years, so there's no one consistent description. Also not related, but this is what it's like when Leviathan is on our side. Not sure where he's getting the water from on the moon, but the effect is still nice.
I don't really care about that as much as how long this travel is taking. I'm just guessing we're going to that crystal tower in the center, but couldn't you have parked the Lunar Whale a little closer to the entrance? I'm not sure why we have to go through these caves.
It probably couldn't land on the sections where Cecil was mainly walking on, otherwise I'm sure Barack would have put it closer like you mentioned.
Hey, where did the lights go? Did I forget to pay the electric bill again? I hate it when that happens, since then I have to take it from the defense budget, and then my administration gets upset at me because I bankrupted the defense budget already by using it to get some currency to help me get through levels in Candy Crush Saga. I spent a few billion already, but I'm up to level 27, and I might make it to level 28 before my term is over.
There's so much wrong with everything you just said, it would take all day to go over it.
Joe, your story distracted from the incredibly important story details. The Lunarians were mostly asleep, so that's why they're not here, but then one of the names Zemus is controlling Golbez, who is controlling Cain, and that's who the main villain is. Fusoya's brother Kluya had 2 children, and one of them is Cecil, so that makes Cecil half Lunarian. That's why it's kind of confusing, since he looks like a normal person, and so does Fusoya. Now we have to use the Lunar Whale and stop what's happening at the Tower of Babel, since that was lighting up in the last part.
That is certainly a lot. The last part was mainly going through caves and not accomplishing much, if anything, but we're only 4.5 minutes and barely and went to another section of space, learned the name of the real main villain, and have more background into Cecil's heritage. And it was interrupted by Joe misusing the defense budget on a phone game he's barely made any progress in.
Hey, Barack, I think you mentioned something about a proto-Babel earlier. Was that the prototype of this thing?
I'm glad you caught that, George. You are correct. It is a prototype of this. What we're seeing is the giant of Babel, and it's obviously a threat to those here. Well, not really on this island specifically, as it's just near the ruins of the Eblon Castle, but still it would be a threat if it got around to other more inhabited places.
Somehow I doubt the lunar whale is going to be enough to stop it. I mean, it can travel pretty far, but I don't see anything that looks like it can attack with.
You are right on that, but thankfully we very suddenly have a few others that are willing to help us from the other parts of the game.
Oh, hey, there's Yang and the Sylphs. I'm glad they're here. I wonder how they got to the surface with those tanks exactly.
Yeah, that is a very good question. The party had a lot of trouble with just the airship, so I don't know how the tanks got up here unless they were carried this way, which is incredibly unlikely.
And there's Sid, too. I figured he would be back at some point as well, since we already saw him alive working on the airship.
Okay, hold up now. Is that Palom and Porum? I thought they sacrificed themselves by turning into stone earlier. It looks like that's 2 more sacrifices that meant nothing at all. Plus there's Edward too, like this couldn't get any worse as it is.
All right, so I'm going to explain things a bit before Ben inevitably goes on a tirade about how this doesn't make any sense. The characters on the airships and tanks are mainly just a distraction so the others can get into the Giant of Babel to destroy it from the inside. That's going to be where the next several minutes take place with more new enemies to fight, as it's a much more mechanical area than we're used to aside from the Tower of Babel and Zod, I suppose. Now, Ben, if you want to discuss how bad this story is yet again, then feel free.
So I didn't realize this game could top itself with Yang and Sid blatantly surviving death when they shouldn't have, but they have unfortunately succeeded. This makes absolutely no sense, as unlike the explosions, which is point blank, as they had no logic to them, but the twins petrifying themselves was established in clear detail that they did it to themselves and couldn't just be cured by someone else. I still think the walls realistically should have crushed them all regardless, but if that's just how this world works, then so be it. Now, it just breaks its own rules by having the Elder change them back, where at no point this was established that he could do so, and I'm pretty sure he never mentioned he could do it either. Or he actually could do it and just didn't say anything to the party to make them stay sad, with no hope of the twins coming back, which is not a great alternative. At this point, I wouldn't even be surprised if Anna and Tella actually did come back to life, because why does death even matter in this game when it just gets undone off-screen 4 times at least?
I have to agree with Ben here. This game already made no sense at points before, but it's really going off the deep end with the lack of logic. I don't think the Giant of Babel is even a threat. If people come back to life so often, it may as well not even be here. I wonder if the King and Queen of Eblan can be brought back, since the game seems willing to let everybody be here. It would have been a more effective moment if the characters hadn't come back, and even when they did, I don't know what they're actually doing. Yes, they're here to fight, but even if they didn't show up, it's not like the other airship members couldn't have done their goal themselves. Why did they need Edward and Yang and Sid and the twins specifically?
I don't really mind. I'm happy to see the twins back. When they were stone, I couldn't sniff their hair much, but now that's not an issue.
I don't agree with Joe for obvious reasons, but for Ben and George, yeah, I'm on board. I'm surprised this took the approach it did, and I'd be willing to bet there's even more characters coming back soon.
All right, guys, if you're all done grilling on the game, I would like to explain what's actually in here. We're almost done with the insides of the Giant, though. There's actually a spot to rest and buy items, so if you're willing to grind a little bit for experience, then this is a great place to do it, since the enemies generally are good with experience and you can't come back here later on in the game. I don't plan on buying anything now, though. Up ahead are 2 major boss fights, and one of them is going to be a bit more lengthy, or rather 4 of them.
Wait, what do you mean 4? I think that's quite a lot back-to-back, if that's what you mean.
You'll find out in just a moment what I mean by that.
Oh great, even more revived characters who didn't see that one coming. At least them coming back actually serves a purpose. It looks like I'm going to have to bring back my roasting for all 4 of them yet again.
Before you start that, we may skip around a little bit in the individual fights, so we'll cut ahead as to not make it too long. Otherwise, the main strategies against them still apply for the most part. All right, Ben, do your thing.
All right, Scarmiglia and Barack beat you once and technically twice when you came back on the bridge, and now it's time to take you down a 3rd time. You are so ugly that Edward runs away from you in battle. Your breath is so disgusting it inflicts status effects on the party.
All right, Ben, what's the next roast?
I'm not really sure. For some reason, I can't think of any more roasts for him. I don't want to repeat what I said before for these fiends, but I think I'm out of roasts for now. The game has been going on for a while, and most of my good material has been used up.
That's all right. His part of the fight is almost done anyway. He's pretty weak to fire attacks, so he isn't going to be a focus of your roasts, since I'm already roasting him in game.
All right, you've got this, Ben. Now it's Cagnazzo's attempt. You've got more material to work with now.
Yeah, you're right. I've got this. Cagnazzo, your mother is so fat, she's even heavier than you. You are so stupid that you probably came up with the idea of fighting the party one at a time instead of all at once. You're so fat that you probably are going to break this bridge-like area and cause us to not progress with the game. You are so watery that you can't swim.
You were doing all right there for a moment, but you're really falling apart now. This guy should go down to lightning quickly enough so you don't have to focus on him much more.
Yeah, Donald's right. You don't have to worry about him. Just be sure you get focused on the next one being Barbariccia.
Donald, can you do your thing before Joe goes nuts again?
Oh yeah, sure, here I go.
Thank you, Donald. Now, as for Barbariccia, you are so... How am I even supposed to roast her while Joe is going nuts anyway? Even if Donald wasn't covering her, she's still in her tornado form, so he couldn't see her anyway.
At this point, I'm just hoping he calms down, but you may not even have the chance right now. Okay, we're skipping ahead to Rubicante. I'm not having Joe do this any more than necessary.
Hey, sorry about that, guys. I went a little crazy there. I don't know if I caused much of an inconvenience for anybody.
You did cause an inconvenience in many ways, but now we should just focus on what's ahead. Rubicante's here and Ben has to roast him soon or he won't have the chance again.
I don't know, guys. I think my roasting skills are out of commission. I'm sure there's a lot of people in the comments section who could do a lot better than me right now. In fact, I think we should make that the comment question of the day. Do you have any roasts for any of the four fiends? I'd like to see some of those if you have any, since I didn't come up with a lot.
Yeah, that would be a pretty interesting comment section to see. Right now, we're planning on reading some of these answers from this video and the previous one later on, so we'll acknowledge those at some point. Right now, we just need to focus on Rubicante. In some ways, he's actually easier. He never does anything with his cloak, and though his fire spells tend to do a lot of damage, it's not typically that difficult to heal from.
Hey, that Fasoy guy looks like a puddle with how he's positioned. That's kind of weird.
Now that you mention it, yeah, he kind of does. These fiends never could take us down before, so that's not changing now that Rubicante is defeated. Something interesting before we move on is there is an exclusive boss fight in the 3D versions that's a combination of the fiends, but actually is fairly difficult. You can fight it on the second playthrough at the Mount Ordeal's Peak if you go back there later in the game, or I think you can here as well optionally, though I haven't done it here specifically before. Its name is Garyon, and if you have the adamant armor, you'll be in good condition. That's an armor I'll go more into later, but we can't get it quite yet.
That sounds like a special name for an armor. Are there other ones that are unique like that?
Yes, there are some weapons, mainly in the Game Boy Advance versions, that are new along with the Onion equipment in the 3D versions. The adamant armor is infinite in theory, though very difficult to actually obtain due to the rarity. That's more important once we're in the final area, though. For now, we have to fight against the computer of the giant.
I don't know how to even start roasting a computer, so Barack, I'll just let you explain things from here.
All right, so this can be a little tricky. The main part is the CPU, obviously then the attack and defense nodes. The defense node heals it a lot, so you're going to want to destroy it first. Reflect is on the CPU, so you won't want to use magic right now. Maybe towards the end of the fight, if anything. The attack node does a good amount of damage, but you'll actually want to keep it up until the end. The CPU will not do a lot right now, but if the nodes are gone, then it will revive the nodes fully and use object or globe 199, which will be very bad for the party as you can't really defend against those attacks. The piercing laser does less damage, so that's what you'll need to do. Just use physical attacks and heal. In the 3D version, it's the opposite, where you should take out the attack node before the defense node, but otherwise that's about it. We're skipping ahead now as it's just more of the same.
Aw man, I can't believe we missed out on seeing the same thing over and over again for another minute. Well, I'll try to recover, but no promises.
All right, now that the fight is done, are we going to do anything important here?
Yes, the computer is destroyed, so the giant won't be attacking anymore. Also, if you don't talk through it with your defense budget mismanagement again, then you'll see some other important details.
It seems we're not alone here.
That must be bad timing on his part. Like he couldn't come by at the same time the CPU was being destroyed because that would have been too difficult if he was there too.
Hecluia was also the name of Cecil's father. That must mean they are brothers after all this time. That must be a weird feeling for him to have.
So now Golbez is finally not being controlled by Zemus at this point. Was it ever shown why Golbez is more susceptible to being controlled than Cecil would be despite the same Lunarian blood?
Kind of. I'll explain soon. So this is in the 3D version, so it's not going to visibly show up here. His name was Theodore and was the first child of Cluia and Cecilia. Cecilia died right about the same time Cecil was born, and she actually couldn't be brought back, unlike mostly everyone else here. He started to blame Cecil for her death, and this is what allowed Zemus to take control of Theodore. After a while, Theodore left Cecil alone and was found by the King of Baron. The real one, not Cagnazzo. Theodore became Golbez at some point and was controlled by Zemus for a long time, up until now.
That seems like Star Wars, but with slightly less death involved. Golbez even acts like Darth Vader a lot with the Zemus guy as the Emperor role, I would say.
Oh, hey, does anybody want to hear about the time I fought a guy named Darth Vader? That happened to me a while ago, and it would make for a good story, probably.
Sorry, Joe, there's not too much left to today's video, and besides, I don't really want to hear it anyway, so it's best to save it for next time, or just not at all would be even better.
I'm sure there will be some time to tell your story in the next couple parts. The last areas can't take all that long.
I did want to point out something before we're done for the day. In this point, the men essentially tell the women to stay behind so they can defeat Zemus. I find this really weird, as it's not like any of them have had any objections to the women being involved at any other point of the game, including going to the moon earlier in this video. It doesn't even last the whole scene, as by the time it ends and they're on the moon, there is no change to the party setup. It comes from nowhere and it ends just as quickly.
It's probably some sort of commentary on gender equality, but I don't know what the message would even be.
All right, everyone, we're almost at the finale. Barack, how much is there left to do before we're done?
We will have 2 more parts after this, one being the majority of the last section on the moon and some side activities, while the last part will be confronting Zemus and finishing the game.
Yeah, that means more time for Joe stories and comment questions.
I'm always glad to see more progress on the game.
As always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.
And peace out, people.